Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. My name is Alison Arnold, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the British Heart Foundation Clinical Research Collaborative. And we're really delighted that you've chosen to spend some time with us to explore a topic that's becoming increasingly important in heart research, and that's patient and public involvement, or PPI, as we often use the term. So whether you've never heard the term before, or you're curious about research, or you're already interested in getting involved, we hope that this webinar will be of interest to you. And our aim is to really demystify research. We're going to go through a bit of what it is, how it works, why we're involving patients and carers and members of the public, and how that makes research much stronger, more relevant, and ultimately is going to improve treatment and care of those living with heart disease. So we're going to begin this evening by explaining what patient and public involvement really means, how it actually differs from taking part in a particular study, and also the many different ways that you can get involved and contribute your experiences and perspectives to shape the future of heart research as well. And in the second half of the webinar, we're going to be joined by a fantastic panel featuring some experienced patient and public contributors alongside a cardiovascular researcher as well. And they're going to share their own experiences, discuss what meaningful involvement looks like in practice, and most importantly, answer some of your questions. So please do make note of anything you'd like to ask throughout the session. And we really hope you're going to leave this evening with a much clearer idea of what research is and why your voice really matters in this space, and some practical guidance on how you can become involved if you'd like to after this evening. So thank you for joining us once again. Before we start, we've just got a couple of housekeeping things to go through. So you'll notice on the screen you've got a little button that says Q&A. This is where you can ask your questions. You aren't able to use the chat function, and you're not able to raise your hand in this instance either. So when you click on the Q&A, there'll be a drop down and you just have to ask a question in that place. And just please note, your name will be visible unless you've selected to post it anonymous. If you see a question that you quite like, or that was a question you were going to ask, you can use the little tick button and that will upvote the question. So the more questions that receive votes will move up in the pecking order, if you like, to be put to our panel. But don't worry, if a question of yours isn't answered this evening, you've asked it, we will be compiling all the questions and be able to send them afterwards with some answers, as well as the slides and the webinar recording as well. So just a note as well, this evening is much more of a general look at patient and public involvement in research. We're really unable to answer any questions of personal nature. So if you could just, submit questions that are directly for our speakers and relating to the topic being covered today. But of course, if you do have questions about your own health conditions, please do get in touch with the fantastic BHF team. They have experienced nurses and information support at their helpline, and you can visit their website to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Leanne Hazel, who's the Patient and Public Involvement Manager at the BHF, who's going to just go through, what PPI is. Leanne?
Thank you, Alison, and thank you everyone for joining. So firstly, what is patient and public involvement, or PPI? So in the UK, the National Institute for Health and Care Research, or the NIHR, defines patient and public involvement in research as research being carried out with or by patients or members of the public, rather than to, about, or for them. It's important to note that PPI is different from taking part in a study as a trial participant. So PPI is about working in partnership with people with lived experience, where they can actively contribute to research by sharing ideas, giving feedback, and helping guide decision making. You may hear PPI referred to by different terms, including PPIE, so that's patient and public involvement and engagement, or CIE, community involvement and engagement. But while the terminology may vary, the core principle is the same. It's all about working collaboratively to shape, influence, and improve research. PPI in research adds value in many different ways to the people who get involved, to the research, and to the organisation and its staff. So, just to give a few examples, for the people who get involved, involvement can help empower individuals and build skills and confidence. The research is more relevant, better designed, and focused on what really matters. We also, for the organisation and staff, make more relevant funding decisions and have a stronger connection to the cause. So at the British Heart Foundation, we are the largest independent funder of cardiovascular research in the UK, with a current active research portfolio of over £460 million and an ambition to fund over £100 million worth of new research every year. So for more than 60 years, our research has helped save and improve lives affected by cardiovascular disease. We fund scientists, clinicians to carry out research into the causes, prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of CVD, as well as its risk factors. And our strategy sets the vision as a world where everyone has a healthier heart for longer. Importantly, we'll get there by funding research to help and save and improve lives. However, PPI is a key part of how we will achieve this vision. Working with patients, carers, and the public helps ensure the research we fund is relevant, accessible, and focused on what matters most to those affected by CVD. So just a little bit about PPI and research at the BHF. So we have a strong commitment to involving people affected by CVD across all areas of our work, and this includes opportunities to be involved in shaping our research programmes. Heart Voices members have and continue to be involved in shaping our BHF strategy. So this is advising on our overall research strategy and our approach to involving patients in our work, for example. We also have patient representation in research funding decisions, so reviewing funding applications and influencing decision making. We also have patient representation on our high value research projects, so such as Cure Heart, a £30 million grant, which aims to find a cure for inherited heart muscle diseases. We also have a range of external opportunities, so from researchers across the UK, really looking to find lived experience representatives to help shape their research projects. You can choose from a range of opportunities, from one-off activities such as online focus groups or in-person workshops to longer-term panel roles. And importantly, there's in-person, online or remote options available to suit you. At BHF, we also work closely with teams across our BHF partnerships, including the BHF Clinical Research Collaborative, or CRC. And this has its own dedicated team. So now I will hand over to Alison from the CRC, who will tell you a bit more about research, opportunities to get involved in the work of the CRC as well. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Leanne. So I started the opening about sort of this idea about demystifying research, because I think the work we've done with lots of patients and the public members is around research. They think of research as being sort of people running around lab coats and labs with lots of test tubes and lots of experiments, and that is a type of research. That's sort of basic science research. But the research we're really thinking about is what's called clinical research, and this is around asking important questions to find evidence for things like treatment or care or practice. So an example could be, we have one medication A and medication B, and we want to find out which one's the best one for a particular condition, which one might give fewer side effects. They might be looking at, what is the safest dose to give for this medication. And also things like, we've got exercise, does it reduce the risk? And we all have heard about 10,000 steps a day, and everyone says, well, where has that come from? Well, that's actually come from lots of research done to say, this is what will help, in this area. And also increasingly now we've got a digital world, we've got AI everywhere it seems, and we've got lots of fancy devices, our own devices such as smartwatches, and could these potentially detect heart conditions and make, sort of, we could be looking at preventing cardiovascular disease or detecting it much earlier, which will mean sort of better treatment and better outcomes. But with all of this, we need not only researchers who bring scientific knowledge, we need those people with real life knowledge and real life experience. So those are the patient and carers on the ground to be able to bring to shape that design of the research, shape the delivery as well, and ultimately that impact. And when we work together, it does mean that we're going to be looking at the real questions to ask. So we'll have much better questions. As a result, we'll get much better answers. And then ultimately, we're just going to have much better outcomes for patients and those, those living with heart conditions. So I just wanted to briefly go through the research cycle. So again, in the context of clinical research, what happens? So at the very start, talk about this question, what is the question? And this is around identifying and actually prioritizing those questions, because there's lots of questions out there we all want answers to, but there's only a finite amount of sort of resource, human resource and funds as well. So, what is that most important question for people, living with a particular condition? And this is really important for patients to become involved at that stage. So the next stage, once you've got the question, is actually designing that research. So how do we make sure the design of that research is actually practical for participants? So I'll give you a very brief example. Most recently, we've been working with a researcher who's actually looking at the effects that on your kidneys if you've had a heart problem and if you've had a heart attack and a stent put in place. So we've got some small groups of patients who've had this condition who've come together, and his idea was, I'm going to, after you've had your cardiac event, your heart event, you're going to have to go to the hospital and have blood tests twice a week. And that was his, quite naturally thought that was the design. He needed some blood work after this event. And actually, when we got the patients together, they said, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to want to go to a hospital a couple of days after my event. I'm really, that's the last place I'm going to want to go. It's remote. I'm not going to be able to get there. So all of these things around what started out as a sort of, a simple blood test, actually, we've realized that's very difficult for patients. So rather than going forward and designing it around that concept, we're actually now able to sort of make that design much better. And we can only do that when those people with lived experience are brought to the table to help design the research. So after the research is designed, it then goes to an application process. And this goes to a funder, and also they have to get ethics as well. And again, this is crucial for patients to be involved in this space because they can help with that funding proposal. They can help improve what we call a lay summary, which is putting into plain English for everyone to understand. Clinicians, they have, the sort of expert expertise and knowledge, and they use lots of acronyms and fancy words, and general public don't really understand that. So it's really important that that is put into sort of general sort of lay language for them, and patients can do that, and they can again help ensure that trial design is actually ethical for participants as well. So it will go to a funder. So this is, we mentioned before, the British Heart Foundation is the largest funder of heart research in the UK. We've also got lots of funders. We've got the National Institute for Health Research, or NIHR. We have funders in other smaller charities who fund research, and also, commercial funders, so companies or, pharmacology organizations as well. So there's lots of other funding bodies there, but they all sort of expect the same sort of cycle. So finally, that once the funding is accepted, I mean, that is, it can be hard, but the hardest bit is actually carrying out the research. So again, really important that patients can stay involved in this stage because they can be part of a trial group to make sure that study is developed and, and is actually delivered on time, and can highlight any issues during that study to give advice to the team as well. And it's crucial that they're part of it at that stage. And then the final step in the cycle is about sharing the results. And interestingly, this often gets missed. And I think, a lot of patients feel like they've taken part in trials and then they don't hear anything about it, or they take part in a survey or a study and they hear nothing. And it's really difficult if they don't. And I think this is an area that we're really focused on around sharing those results so patients can help prepare that information, again, put it into lay language to share with people in their communities. And this will help the researchers' community communicate the findings as well. So it's a cycle that's important, and patients can be involved in all of the cycle, or they can be involved in one part, but I think it's really crucial that we have patients involved in every part of that research cycle. So just to briefly go through again what the Clinical Research Collaborative is. So we're fully funded by the British Heart Foundation, and the BHF wanted an infrastructure of support on the ground to help researchers come together from all different domains and different disease areas, and also bring them together with patients and clinicians and funders, so to help that support. So we provide that coordination. We provide support in terms of administration. We have some small funding for grants for new researchers who are trying to get into research, and also we function as a sort of a collaboration, to again bring those people together a little bit more and widen the net, I suppose, in terms of research. So we have some tools to do this, and our main tool for collaboration is our National Research Collaboration Database. Some of you may have come across it already. Some of you may be members and registered. If you aren't, I really encourage you to sign up. We'll have a QR code at the end. But this database is for you to register your interest in research in terms of, what heart conditions you're interested in, collaboration research and interests. You might want to be a lead on a group, you might want to give talks, you might want to sort of just take part in some of the areas of what I mentioned in that cycle. And crucially, we want you to sort of be able to tell us your non-clinical skills and experience. And this is really important for researchers because patients have amazing backgrounds. They've come from all different types of jobs, and bringing that to the table just really enriches the space much more. And so you might have legal experience, you might have accounting, you might have marketing, and it's fantastic to have that expertise, to the group as well. The database is safe. There's no unauthorized data sharing. It's kept within the small team. It's not forward facing, so people can't go onto it and find details, and you retain complete control, and you can update or delete any time. But we use that database as a source. If a researcher or clinician comes to us and says we'd like to bring certain patients involved in this area, then we can go to it and we can ask those people, would they like to become involved? And we're essentially a matchmaker. We're sort of like the Tinder of research world, if you like. Not sure, but really encourage you to sign up if you can to that. So I think, so finally, training and support. Now this is crucial. I think a lot of people shy away from research because they think, I don't know, I'll be the only one, I'll be the only patient on a panel of all these, people who are sort of talking about things I don't know about. And that is not the case at all. No matter how you choose to get involved, both the BHF PPI team and also the Clinical Research Collaborative are here to support you. The BHF have amazing training opportunities for you to get started in your role and meet fellow members as well. The ongoing support is there and guidance as well. And it really gives you an opportunity to develop some of your skills and also confidence as well. Sometimes some opportunities do have an offer of a thank you payment. So this is always sort of arranged even in advance. So you'll understand, what you might be getting. But also, if not, especially in the early stages of research, if a researcher hasn't got funding available and they're sort of just going to application stage, if they don't have sort of a monetary payment, the opportunities are still there to develop new skills and network with fellow contributors and researchers, and really know that you're going to make a meaningful contribution to research that is just going to make it so much better and provide a much better outcome on that. So on that note, I think this is the most exciting part of the webinar. We've got our panel members to introduce, and I'm just going to hand over now to Katie Gleason, who is the head of patient and public involvement at the BHF to run the panel this evening. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Alison. And thank you, everyone. As Alison said, my name's Katie Gleeson. I'm Joint Head of Patient and Public Involvement at BHF. It's really great to have you all here tonight. Thank you for giving up an hour of your Tuesday evening. I've got the pleasure of chairing this panel discussion this evening. And before we bring our wonderful panelists onto the screen, I just want to give them a little introduction. So firstly, we have Wendy Davies. Wendy has a number of heart conditions and had a stroke 4 years ago caused by atrial fibrillation. She has been a member of BHF's Patient Advisory Group for Clinical Research, which I'm sure you'll hear more about, which has enabled her to provide a patient perspective on which research BHF should fund. Next, we have Rashmi Kumar. So Rashmi is a carer for family members with multiple long-term health conditions and has lots and lots of PPI experience, which she's going to share with us this evening, which includes being a BHF CRC patient representative and contributor. Next, we have Dr. Ann Cheng, who is a clinical researcher from the University of Leicester. So Anne will be providing a clinical perspective for us, the researcher perspective for us tonight. Anne is a cardiothoracic surgery trainee and is currently working towards a PhD. She has a particular interest in shared decision making and research inclusion. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Little bit of housekeeping just before we get on with it. There's going to be plenty of time to ask panelists questions, but just as a reminder, as Alison spoke about at the start, please submit any questions for our panel via the Q&A at the side. We have moderators working hard in the background who you can't see, who will help filter through the questions. Where possible, please can you direct your questions to a particular panelist, but obviously if you want to ask everyone the question, that is equally okay. You can, as Alison said, you can upvote questions. So if there's something that someone's already asked a question you had, or you think it's a great question, please do put that, tick that question, it will move to the top of the pile. But please, if we're inundated, which I hope we are, and we don't make it to your question tonight, don't panic. We'll make sure we collate them all afterwards and into a Q&A document to share. Finally, I just wanted to say, I think sometimes people can have some difficulties accessing the Q&A via phones and tablets. If that is affecting you, don't worry, just sit back, enjoy the discussion. And as I said, we will be able to follow up afterwards with any unanswered questions. So we're going to get started now. So while I'll give everyone in the audience a few minutes to warm up and think about what they want to ask our panel. And while you're doing that, I, as the chair, have the privilege of starting with a few questions. So my first question is to all the panelists: how and why did you get involved in patient and public involvement? Wendy, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Wendy Davis. I wanted to get involved with the British Heart Foundation after I'd had open heart surgery 8 years ago, and I used the British Heart Foundation website and services to kind of educate myself a lot about my condition. It's a trusted source of information that's much better than Google, and I thought, how can I give back to such an important organisation? And unfortunately, because I'm now disabled physically, I couldn't do running a marathon or any of those things. And I thought I'd love to kind of give back in a different way. And so I stumbled across Heart Voices, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was a great way to meet other patients as well that have been through similar experiences, and also really understand the whole world of clinical research and everything that the BHF do, which has been a great journey.
Thank you, Wendy. Rashmi, over to you. How and why did you get involved in PPI?
Well, very similar to Wendy. I'm an ex-stroke patient, and I lost physical and cognitive capabilities. This was a few years ago. This is about 25 years ago, and had to learn slowly but surely to gain confidence, to be able to carry out my everyday activities. So I thought, well, I have a family history of heart conditions, and I wanted to understand what can I do to better manage myself. And having sort of worked as a volunteer for several years, I came across British Heart Foundation and really sort of reached out to them. And my reasons for getting involved with British Heart Foundation was really just to help myself, to better understand, to better self-manage myself. What can I do so that I can improve my capabilities, my understanding of health management? But very quickly, I learned that it was not just about myself. It was about being able to share my experience with others in the group, and to really share my life experiences and challenges, everyday challenges, and how can that help to better manage others and their families, to look after themselves, to better prepare themselves for their health conditions. So that was my reason for getting involved.
Thanks, Rashmi. So a mixture there of giving back, but also kind of the benefits you get from yourself. So Wendy, you talked a lot about giving back, but yeah, the benefits you also can get from yourself and understanding your condition more, and also learning from other patients and contributors. Thank you, Rashmi. And Anne, to bring a bit of a different perspective to the conversation, as a researcher, kind of when did you first come across PPI, and how and why? How and why did you get involved?
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's interesting that you asked that. So I had a good think about it. And really, it was actually by the way of being part of a research project that set a really good example of how important PPI is. And that was sort of my very, very first involvement in PPI. It was my very first clinical project that I got invited to be a part of. And I noticed there were quite a few patient and public members already on the group that were just openly sharing their thoughts and expertise about the research project that we were developing. And then at one point, my supervisor at that time said, okay, you know what, you can draft the participant information leaflet and send it to the PPI members to read through when I'm done. And I'm thinking, why do I need to do that? So looking back, I think I was very, very young and naive at that time, but definitely throughout my research career so far, I've definitely really come to appreciate the important role that PPI plays in all parts of the research that Alison has mentioned.
Fab. Thank you, Anne. Interesting to hear your experiences kind of right back when, and I'm sure we'll hear more about kind of how you've moved on since then as well and what you've learned. I'm going to go back to Wendy and Rashmi now. Can you, firstly, can you give us an example of ways you've been in research and tell us a little bit about what that really means in practice? Because I think it's very easy to say, oh, get involved in research, go to a meeting and talk about a research study, but what does that really mean? What did you have to do? Help us a bit with that kind of demystifying what patient and public involvement is. Rashmi, do you want to go first on that one?
For sure. Thank you. Well, Alison started by explaining sort of the research cycle. And so I've been involved in research with other members of the public and patients in an advisory group. They have come together as a group to share their ideas on what issues they are and challenges they experience. So researchers have come to this advisory group at the very, very beginning of their research ideas, when they are only thinking about what research and they want to do, what issues they would like to resolve. And us as an advisory group, and usually the advisory group that I've been involved in have been 8 to 12 people. Some can be smaller, some can be bigger, depends on how complex the needs are of the researchers. But we've come from all over the UK. They come from different parts to really with different health conditions, different geography, and different background. So as an advisory group, researchers have come to the group and they've shared their ideas, where we will hear their ideas, we will try to understand what are they trying to do, and can that be delivered from the patient perspective? Is it going to be burdensome for patients to be able to, if they're expecting someone to go into a clinic or a health center to give blood every day, is that going to be reasonable or not? So we listen to the researchers, we try to understand, and then we share from our perspective of the how easy is it going to be for the participants to get involved. And that's been really immensely valuable for us to hear about what is being done to address our needs, but also it's been helpful for researchers to be able to realistically develop a study where they can recruit the right number of participants who will get involved to help them to meaningfully deliver research in an effective way. And that's what I've been involved in.
Thanks, Rashmi. So it's a great example where you've given some of that really kind of practical like feedback to researchers just about how something might not be feasible or realistic to a researcher, and they just hasn't even occurred to them that that might be a barrier to people participating. So I think that's a really great example. Wendy, do you have anything to share on that? Like what kind of, what has involvement looked like for you in practice?
Yeah, I've done lots of different PPI with the British Heart Foundation, and that's varied from being part of focus groups, where I've been to a focus group face to face in London and helped with redesigning the patient leaflets that you receive in the hospital, the BHF versions, and working with other people, to understand what real patients want to see in a leaflet rather than kind of, something that's corporate or commercial or clinically driven. It's what do patients want to know? And I think that really follows through a lot of the work that I've done is it's understanding what do patients want rather than what clinicians kind of think that patients want, and they can be quite different. And I've been really lucky to be involved in the Clinical Studies Committee, which is a big committee that the British Heart Foundation has that looks at clinical study applications. So that's grant applications for large amounts of, say, £1 million that's going to be done on a clinical studies committee. And patients have an equal part in that process. And that's really exciting. We get an equal vote on the board against all the doctors of what we think's important, which is really exciting. And what that looks like from a practical point of view is we get sent grant applications by email, we read through them, we have a little question sheet that we answer, kind of, do we think it's patient focused, is this part good, and then we send that back, and then we meet in person and we meet with other patients and we all discuss what we thought we liked about an application. We all give practical advice, like Rashmi said, saying, well, this application might digitally exclude people as well, because I think a lot of researchers can be quite a lot bit younger and perhaps not realise that not everyone has an iPad or that not everyone has a smartphone, and so we try and make sure that everyone can be involved. It's really important to me that patient involvement is diverse, and I've learned a lot about other people's perspectives from being involved in patient involvement. I think it's really important that all we have to do is just give our own experience and then kind of make sure that researchers then include that in what they're doing. And we're so well supported as well by the British Heart Foundation and British Heart Foundation CRC as well in participating in research. It seems so scary to me at first, but it's amazing how they hold your hand along the way, and you're with other patients as well doing exactly the same process.
Thanks, Wendy. And I think you'll probably agree that the key is that there's no right or wrong answer when you're providing a patient perspective in research, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Your own experience
answer.
is absolutely valid and individual.
Yeah, brilliant. Anne, I'm going to come back to you now. How can you give an example of how you've involved patients and carers in your research and what the benefits were?
Yeah, probably the best example I can think of is from when I was putting together my PhD proposal. So at the time I was thinking, oh, what should my PhD be about? And my predecessor at that time did a piece of work that looked at consent in heart surgery. And I initially thought, oh, this is fantastic. It's a great topic. I might just continue on this theme of consent in my own PhD. And then I brought it to this PPI group that I work really closely with, and they just challenged me so much. They said, you need to think bigger than just consent, because they felt that, to a lot of patients, consent is just this meaningless ritual where they have to sign a piece of paper so that they cannot sue the doctors if something goes wrong. They feel that it's just the barrier between the patients having the procedure that they want. And so they really, really challenged me to think bigger and to think about the broader patient journey at that time. And so with that in mind, I took that away, gave it a lot of thought, and we just kept going back and forth with multiple discussion. Ultimately, we ran a PPI workshop with the support of other PPIs as well. And we agreed that actually the focus really should be around shared decision making. And ever since that, it's been really well received, and I've been definitely learning a lot since. So yeah, I can only say without the PPIs, I wouldn't be doing my PhD.
Oh wow, that's quite a statement, and I think is a really good example of that kind of ongoing dialogue that you have, and that's what good PPI should be, right? It's that ongoing dialogue.
Absolutely.
We're starting to get a few questions in the chat now. So I'm going to ask you all one more, and then I'll move on to some of the questions from the audience. It's a question to all of you, actually. Maybe I'll come back to you first, Rashmi. Can you share one example where your lived experience or the PPI has really led to a change in a study or project? Like something, it could be something big or something really quite small and specific. Have you got one kind of really good example, Rashmi?
Yeah, I was involved in a research which started a couple of years ago, and it was to do with patients' experience and preferences while waiting for elected cardiac surgery. So it is, we know that a lot of the time patients are waiting for their heart surgery, and those surgeries are planned, but then they're often delayed, or at the last minute something happens, emergency comes up, and then you put on a back burner and you have to wait. So this research was to try to find out really the stresses and difficulties that patients go through while waiting for their elective cardiac surgery. This was a mixed method study where we wanted to collect information from the patients directly, trying to gain some idea of what challenges they were experiencing. It was done with a handful of hospital trusts in South London because it had a diverse population. It had a lot of patients waiting for their cardiac surgery. And it was done over a period of 6 months. But the information that was received from that led to a substantial understanding by the healthcare teams and the hospital staff in how they need to improve communication with the patient. How can they be supported during that time, during that period of waiting for the surgery, so that they are better prepared, they are not stressed out, and therefore their surgery and the healing process can be better improved. And it has led to a change in system design, in communication and management of the patient. So that was my experience of getting, and that physically led to a change. And so that was one of the success stories that I got involved in.
That's great, Rashmi. A really quite a significant change as well. And I think as probably someone getting involved from PPI, it's very rewarding when you can see that kind of really tangible change. It's not always as big as that. That's a great example. But yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I mean, the paper got published only this year, beginning of this year in January 2026. And it's basically called Patient Experience and Preferences While Waiting for Elective Cardiac Surgery. I would recommend everyone look at that, and you will see how patients were involved, how the surveys were collected with the patient advisory group, and pilot testing the surveys, and how the results were then assessed, which led to the change in the hospital system.
Real. Thank you, Rashmi. Wendy, I'm going to come to you now. Have you got an example of where lived experience or?
Yeah, just a very quick one. I would just say is that I've been involved in quite a few projects where it's been about making sure that patient information is better. Because often, for example, one I did recently where it was about a hospital wanting to improve the information leaflets of when patients went to a scan. And often they can be very generic. The one that they had at the time was 7 pages long, lots of information, and it really is quite overwhelming. And you really only often read the first couple of paragraphs and think, I'll read it when I get there, and then often don't. So it was about making information concise, patient important things as well, of where to park are actually probably more important than a lot of the technical information about it. So I think it's really important to be involved in something that makes information useful to patients.
And such an important thing to get right if you're going to recruit participants, aren't you?
Yes.
And it should be, you'd think, quite simple to get right, but often that is not the case. So thanks, Wendy. Great example. And before I turn to some questions from the audience, Anne, do you have anything to add? I know you've already given us some examples of where kind of PPIs led to a change, but have you got any other examples you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I've got a really good one actually that just came to mind. So without naming the hospital, it's one of the biggest heart surgery hospitals in the country. And with the way clinical research is set up, you want to recruit as many hospitals to be involved so that you can deliver clinical studies. But this big hospital had a lot of resource challenges, a lot of political issues. And I remember one of our very active PPI members got involved in the conversation. And they managed to set up a face-to-face meeting. And within the first 5 minutes, she went, right, there's this clinical study that is looking at heart surgery and women. And she just challenged the director of research going, why are you not being a part of this study? Are you saying that, people that you serve are not good enough to be a part of this study? And because she did that, as from a patient and public member's perspective, the hospital completely changed their tracks. They are now one of the biggest recruiting sites for a lot of the different clinical studies. So it just goes to show the power that the PPI voice can have.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, as you say, the power of one voice can have a big influence sometimes. I'm going to move and take some questions from the audience now. The first one is a very practical question, but a very, very important question. So what sort of time commitment would I have to give to be involved, and how do you fit it around your day to day? And I can assume, I might assume that this might be someone who's working still. And so, yeah, it's not easy. So Wendy, do you have any, I know you're working in a very high powered job. So have you got any advice on how you kind of fit it in and the time commitment?
That's a great question. Yeah, and one of the first questions I thought about, I didn't know if I'd have enough time. I work full time for a big corporate health company, 5 days a week, and I'm a single parent, look after my 16-year-old son. But this is something I'm passionate about. And I think when you're passionate about something, you make time. And there's so many different experiences available for you from a PPI perspective. You can do as little or as much as you want. For the Clinical Studies Committee, that meets only every 6 months, so it's a chunk of work kind of which I can do the reviewing the applications in the evenings, and it only happens every 6 months, so it's something I can do quite easily. And other things are one-off events, and so sometimes I might take a day annual leave, or actually my company, I asked them and they were actually happy to give me volunteering leave for that day. So it's very, very flexible, and there's lots of different opportunities.
I was going to say, often employers often offer volunteering days, and PPI can be a really good way to make use of those if it's something you're interested in. Rashmi, do you have anything you'd like to add to what Wendy has said?
I think Wendy is absolutely right. There's so many ways you can get involved. You can do as much as you want or as little as you want. And it doesn't have to be 9 to 5. You can do it outside the office hours. You can do it on the weekend. We don't realize all of us have got immense power. We have the reach within our communities. We know of other patients who are struggling. So you can actually talk about the research. You can get them to become participants in the research. You can get involved by simply just reviewing the documents and saying, actually, will that work or that won't work? That will encourage people to get involved or not get involved. You can get involved with your healthcare teams in actually informing them that there is this research that was done, that results were found out. Do you know you can do this and you can do that? So there are so many different ways, but crucially, just come and talk to the British Heart Foundation. That the involvement team will help you, will nurture you, will support you in whatever level of time you want to spend. So do not feel that you have to commit to a certain amount of time.
Yeah, definitely, Rashmi. Hopefully there is lots of different opportunities available, as Wendy and Rashmi said, things that will only take an hour or two of your day once every 6 months, some things that are bigger and longer for those who want to give more time. So there is a mix. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is a really great question. And I'm going to come to you first, Anne, to get the researcher's perspective. How do you get comfortable providing feedback to researchers or organizations without finding it daunting? I think that's a really good question, because I can imagine that first time you go into that kind of meeting with researchers or kind of big, large organizations, it can be quite intimidating. So from your perspective, Anne, do you have any advice or suggestions?
Probably that we are also just people, and more often than not, your lived experience means a lot more than a lot of clinician or researchers' own ego, in my opinion. I think definitely what good involvement looks like is that there is no power dynamic. Everybody is bringing a piece of knowledge. They're bringing a piece of their own experience, their expertise to the table. And it is through that collaborative effort that we can then bring about good research. So I would say, don't be afraid to speak up. definitely been plenty of meetings where the PPIs are telling the researchers like what exactly we're doing wrong. And that actually makes the research so much better than having that worry about, oh, I might offend somebody, because I think it is so important that we're in this all together. We're all in this to do better research, to benefit, other people affected by the disease. So definitely just go for it.
And as we said earlier, there is no wrong answer. Wendy, in your, you've sat on the BHF Clinical Studies Committee, which is full of lots of very, very experienced researchers. How did you find that? How did you get comfortable kind of providing that kind of really frank, honest feedback?
Yeah, of course, the first time is quite daunting. You see a long list of, clinical professional names and doctors and professors and things, and it's a little daunting at first, but they're all just so warm, friendly and welcoming. But also in this scenario, we're the expert in the room. I think that's what surprised me. They obviously have the clinical expertise in their areas, but they're looking for lived experience, and that's what we're experts in. So no one's asking me to explain open heart surgery. People are just asking me what I experienced when I went through it as a patient. And so I think it's just remembering you're only being asked on topics that you know about, so it's nothing to be frightened of. And they are, like Anne said, everyone's just people and really friendly.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think from my experience as well, sometimes you get actually speak to the other side, kind of staff and researchers can actually be quite intimidated by having a conversation with patients, because they are they don't want to offend, and they also are concerned that they're going to get really challenged. So I think also remember that if you feel uncomfortable, potentially so do the people on the other side of the table. Rashmi, do you have anything you wanted to add around the kind of giving feedback and feeling comfortable and confident to do that?
I think the biggest thing that you must believe in yourself is you are the most, as Wendy said, you are the most important person. You have gone through the pain. You have gone through the challenges every day of how to get out of the bed, how to sit on your chair, how to eat certain food, how to step out of the front door. You are going through that. Researcher is not going out there. They've seen hundreds and hundreds of patients probably, but they don't live through that personal experience. So you can share your stories. And by sharing your stories, researchers will then start to live your life. They will start to experience and feel you as a human being, not just another number. And that is the biggest contribution you can make. Usually, in my experience of getting involved in research, and I've only been doing it for less than 5 years, but I have not come across one researcher who has felt that they don't want to listen to the PPI. Today, PPI is regarded as the central part of delivering research. So you are the most important person in the room. Believe that you are important. You only need to have confidence.
Thanks, Rashmi. Great answer. I'm going to go to another question now, which is, I think a really important one as well, as I'm interested in getting involved, but how easy is it to start? Now, I think we've touched on that a bit, but I don't know if anyone's got any advice, like that kind of first step. That is probably the thing that might be hardest for some people. Wendy, I'm going to come back to you first. Any kind of suggestions, advice on that?
Yeah, I think it is quite daunting. And the first thing I got involved in, I was like, do I have the skills necessary to do this? But you need to scrap your kind of traditional CV. Really, your kind of CV in this is have you been through life experience of a cardiac condition? So if you have that, then you have the experience needed. And I think it is just taking that first step, doing something, signing up for something, whether it's a survey, whether it's getting involved in a group. But the rewards are just so much more than I ever expected that I really would recommend it to everyone. You get to meet other patients. You will get so much from it that I promise you'll be so glad. I've not spoken to a single patient who's regretted their decision to get involved. So yeah, just be brave, and the BHF and the committees here will definitely support you all the way.
And Rashmi, same question to you.
Well, I will say in the first place, just come and talk to British Heart Foundation. Just come and talk to the involvement team at BHF, and they will come and guide you. I mean, I can only share from my perspective. For me, I have learned to become confident in asking the right question, to engaging with my GP my hospital doctors, consultants, healthcare teams, asking the right question and getting the right guidance from them. So that first step is always the hardest. But once you get involved, you will find it will become easy. And you will come across people like myself, Wendy, and others in the PPI group who have done, some have done for some time, some have done only for a few months, but they will help you. We're all together and we will help each other.
Thank you, Rashmi. I've got a quick question for Anne, actually. I don't know if you can help with this one, which is how would you go about finding out if there is a project study you can help with near where you live? I don't know if you can answer that one. I would say probably registering for the CRC database is a good place to start. I don't know if there's anything else from your perspective, Anne, where people can go to find out about things that are more local to them. Or is that a follow-up one?
I feel like there are various different ways, and obviously with geographical where you are may not always work, but definitely the BHF CRC database is a really good place to start. Sometimes you can reach out to the trust or the hospital that you're at, or say if you're interested in, say, research that's based more in the community setting, reach out to the GPs to say, are there any studies that are ongoing that I can be involved in? Similarly, there are also, I know there's the BHF CRC database, but I might point a plug, the NIHR also has a similar-ish database where you can sign up, again, with your local geographical details. And then lastly, there are wider databases, so clinical trials registry. I have had people contact me through that saying, I would like to be involved in research. Can I help? But obviously that is a bit more advanced and that requires a bit more digging. So that would not be the first option I suggest.
Thanks, Anne. That's super helpful. And we can definitely collate some of these and follow up with afterwards. We are rattling through the questions, but also rattling through the time. So I'm going to come back quickly to Wendy and Rashmi. A question for someone's posted for both of you is, what types of training have you been provided with by the BHF that supported you in your work? Wendy, come to you on that one first.
Yeah, it's quite daunting, like you say, at first, thinking, you know, what do I need to get started? But there's lots of mentoring support at the beginning. So kind of talking to existing members of the committee that I was about to join was really helpful. Always having that support with the staff in the PPI team that will give you plenty of information. But I think it's just about getting started, you know, being involved in your first focus group, whatever it might be. It's very easy and all the information is given to you in advance, and it's timely, it's useful, it's helpful. You don't need any kind of expertise to get started. You just kind of go straight into it.
Yes, hopefully we hold your hand pretty well through that first bit and provide kind of all the information you'll need to get involved. Rashmi, have you got anything to add to that answer?
I think what I will say to you is, do not feel whatever training you need, you will be able to get that. Either you'll be able to get it from your fellow PPIE colleagues, or you will be able to get it from BHF, and they will guide you. They may have some in-house training themselves, resources that you can access, or they'll be able to guide you. But as Wendy said and Anne said, the only training you need is to be able to talk with and have the confidence to talk of what challenges, because that's all people want to hear, and that's what researchers want to hear. How easy is it to deliver that research? So your contribution will help them to design a research study that can be done respectfully and quickly to help us together as collective.
Thank you, Rashmi. This is actually another question I think aimed mainly at Rashmi and Wendy. Wendy, is there any type of selection process that you have to go through to take part? I guess firstly, I can answer from a BHF point of view is sometimes we do have informal processes for people to take part because we can't have everyone, unfortunately, but for some opportunities, absolutely not. It's open to anyone and everyone. But Wendy, could you speak a little bit about your experience of kind of going through what I don't like to call it a selection process, but a kind of informal process before you sign up to an opportunity?
Yeah, there's a real variety kind of. I guess the first thing is, you know, do you have the relevant lived experience for that piece of work? So that, you know, making sure kind of you've been through that procedure or whatever it might be. So that's, I guess, really a big part of the selection process is, your relevant life experience, a lot of the things I've just signed up for and gone straight ahead and done. Then there's bigger pieces of work with more of a commitment, like the Clinical Studies Committee, where I had what I guess you could call an interview, but it was just a really friendly chat online with some of the team members and just asking me kind of what my experience was from a clinical perspective, and just checking that I was happy to confidently speak to others about my experience. I guess really probably just checking I'm quite chatty and open to talking about things. So yeah, it was not daunting in the slightest, you know, so I definitely recommend going ahead with that.
And would you say, Wendy, as well, it's almost as much as an opportunity for you to ask questions as well of the kind of the research team or the BHF team, whoever it is, because you can ask questions, make sure you understand exactly what it is you're letting yourself in for.
Absolutely. It wasn't those formal questions of, can you give me a time where you've done the following? It was very much just a kind of, back and forth questions about what things look like. Very easy. And
Rashmi, how about you? Have you had any experience of kind of having to go through those selection processes?
Yes, I will say yes, and that's if when you hear my answer, you will understand that selection process is only really reasonable selection processes. And I say why it's reasonable, because when researchers are doing research, they might be looking at a certain demographic. They might be looking for that you're living in a certain geographical area of UK, or you might be having they might have enough female patients and they want male patients, or they might want a certain age. They will usually specify that in when they develop. They would like, but
we've lost you there a bit, Rashmi. I think it's Rashmi, not me. Is it? Yeah. We lost your mic a bit there. Maybe if you just pop yourself on mute and off again, or I'll come to Anne and come back to you afterwards. Your mic went a bit crackly. Anne, I was going to ask you from a research.
Is it working now?
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's better.
Sorry, apologies. It must be the internet issue. What I was going to say is usually the selection process is identified by the researchers themselves, and they might require a certain type of condition or a certain age that you have to be. But crucially, if you feel that you are the appropriate, just apply for it. What the researchers will do is they will signpost you to another research, or they will hold your name in a database, so that when a research, they'll approach you, but you have the equal right to say yes or no whenever they ask you to come and join any research.
Thanks, Rashmi. And Anne, do you have anything to add to that in terms of, from your perspective, in terms of how you obviously work with PPI reps and how you select them?
Yeah, I don't think there is much in terms of the selection process, but definitely, as Rashmi and Wendy have mentioned, sometimes it does depend on the research study itself. The thing that I do want to highlight is that, you know, the term is patient and public involvement. So it's not always that you have to have the lived experience. You could be, you know, you could just be a public contributor. And a PPI friend of mine has always said that, you know, just because you're not a patient today doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be a patient another time. So I think all voices and all input are all just as valid.
Brilliant. We are very rapidly running out of time this evening, so I'm going to ask you, just to wrap us up, all of you, just to ask maybe in one quick sentence, if there's anyone on this call tonight who's thinking, oh, I'd quite like to get involved, but I'm not sure where to start, what would the kind of one piece of advice you would give them be today? Anne, I'll come back to you first.
I never fear. Go forth and be a PPI member.
Thank you, Anne.
Honestly, you guys have so much support. There is BHF, there's BHF CRC, there are peer members like Rashmi and Wendy themselves. So definitely just don't be afraid to jump in.
And Wendy, how about you? Your one sentence piece of advice?
Yeah, just go for it. Be brave, give it a go, and I'm looking forward to meeting you.
And finally, Rashmi, same question to you.
Please take part. You will learn so much, and it will change your life. So get involved, take part.
Thank you, Rashmi. So a really strong message from all three of you there. Be brave, go for it. You've got nothing to lose. And as I said, there's no wrong answers. So yeah. We have run out of time. We've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up the discussion now. As I said, any questions we didn't get to, and I know there are a few, apologies. We will follow up with a Q&A with any outstanding questions, and also add to some of the answers that we have already given tonight. Firstly, a huge thank you to our wonderful panelists for sharing your experiences so openly tonight, and and the really thoughtful responses. I think what came through to me was that kind of real passion for making research better, more relevant, and ultimately grounded in like real life experiences and things that are practical for people. And I guess I've also taken away that what patient and public does, or lived experience does, is it adds something a bit different. It's those kind of practical things, the emotional or real world experience that is really, really vital, that is often missed by researchers. So thank you. We're going to leave everyone tonight with some key contact details for both the BHF and the CRC, so you can follow up with us and find out more about getting involved. Remember, we both also share opportunities and get involved with other organisations and researchers, so it's not all BHF opportunities. We also encourage you as well to look at other organisations and other charities that might be relevant to you and see what they're doing in terms of PPI. So people like Diabetes UK, the Stroke Association, any other organisation that is relevant to you and your lived experience. Find out what they're doing too. And finally, thank you to everyone who's joined the session this evening, given up an hour of their Tuesday evening. I really hope you found the session useful and encouraging. First thing tomorrow, we will be circulating a feedback form. So please repeat it. Please complete it. This is the first time we've done one of these, so we just really like to know your honest feedback, what worked well, what didn't work so well. So hopefully when we do it again, we can make it even better. And yeah, I guess my final takeaway to everyone is, for those of you who are a bit curious about PPI and research but haven't known where to start, I really hope that this gives you the confidence to dip your toe in the water and give it a go. Thank you, everyone.